Why won't you talk to me? I asked softly. I've decided not to speak with strangers, came the curt reply. I see. I'll leave you alone then. Living with my husband's parents had been difficult enough, but after my sister-in-law returned home, they began to treat me like I was invisible. I had braced myself for coldness from my mother-in-law, but I hadn't expected my father-in-law to ignore me as well. It was clear now, the shift had everything to do with my sister-in-law's return. Her dislike for me turned the household upside down. Don't come crying later. You think I'll regret leaving? Dream on, you jerks. I spat out as I packed my things and walked out of their house. 3 days after I left, chaos broke loose inside that home. I first met my husband through work. He was in sales and often visited my office, where I was his main point of contact. As we spent time together during meetings, I grew fond of him. He wasn't conventionally handsome, tall, kind, with a warm smile, but his sincerity made him irresistibly charming. Though many liked him, he chose me, and before long, we started dating. During one of our conversations, he told me about his family, a normal upbringing with loving parents and a sister. I hesitated, but eventually shared my own past, losing my parents young and growing up in an orphanage. It was a painful part of my life. He simply said, "That must have been tough, but don't worry, I'll always be by your side." Not long after, he proposed. He had always been serious about our future, and soon introduced me to his family. When I told them about my background, they listened carefully and reassured me that it wouldn't stand in the way of our marriage. I was so relieved. They made me feel like part of the family. But my sister-in-law, who was extremely close to my husband, had reacted differently. You grew up in an orphanage? She asked, visibly taken aback. My husband had to scold her then, but in hindsight, I realized she probably disliked me from the very beginning. Back then, I brushed it off, thinking we just needed more time to get to know each other. Before our wedding, my husband and I discussed living arrangements. He was about to be transferred for work, and though I considered quitting my job to follow him, my career was just taking off. I'd been entrusted with more responsibilities. After much discussion, we agreed. He would move alone after the wedding, and I would stay behind for work. I wanted us to enjoy some time as newlyweds first, visiting each other during long weekends, treating them like little getaways. Moving straight in with his parents felt a little daunting, but my husband seemed comforted by the idea, probably hoping it would reassure his mother too. Having lost my own family so young, the idea of living with them felt bittersweet but also comforting. I genuinely liked my in-laws, and they had treated me kindly until then. Balancing work and home life was exhausting, but the feeling of belonging, of being part of a family, made it worth it. Then one day, my father-in-law approached me with an unexpected request, the first crack in our peaceful life together. It happened on my day off. My mother-in-law, who was always anxious and often bossed him around, was out shopping. I was about to start cleaning when my father-in-law asked to speak with me. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "I don't want my wife to know, but I need to take some time off work," he said hesitantly. I was taken aback. He explained that tensions with his boss and coworkers, combined with deteriorating health, had pushed him to the brink. Living there, I had noticed how tense things were between them. My father-in-law, a naturally quiet man, seemed to tiptoe around my mother-in-law's moods. Though he had always been thin, lately he looked even more worn down. It would have been comforting if she showed genuine concern, but instead, when he caught a cold and stayed home for a day, she snapped. "A cold? Other men your age are getting promotions. You're not advancing because you're weak." Her words stung more than any fever. Even when he was unwell, he pushed himself to go to work until he couldn't anymore. Behind the scenes, he was breaking down, both mentally and physically, leaving early, coming in late, calling in sick. It was only a matter of time before he had to officially take leave, but he was terrified of his wife's reaction. If he admitted needing a break, she might explode, or worse, leave him. Money was tight, too. His salary depended heavily on overtime, and losing that extra income would hit them hard. He didn't dare confide in my husband either, fearing the news would reach his wife. That's why he came to me, asking if I could help quietly cover some of the bills. "If I tell her, she might even leave me," he said, his voice cracking. Hearing that broke my heart. I was truly grateful to my in-laws for welcoming me so warmly despite my background growing up in an orphanage. When my father-in-law confided in me about his struggles, I wanted to support him however I could. "Okay," I told him, "I'll send money to your account every month. Use it for whatever you need." "I'm really sorry," he said, bowing his head. "I'll get better soon and return to work. Thank you so much." From then on, My father-in-law pretended to leave for work each morning, while I secretly transferred money into his bank account to help cover expenses. Luckily, my mother-in-law was not one to scrutinize bank statements carefully, so she didn't notice. My father-in-law spent his days visiting a mental health clinic or taking quiet walks in the mountains. Over time, his health and spirits visibly improved, and I believed he would return to work soon. But then, something unexpected happened. After an argument with her husband, my sister-in-law moved back into the family home. "Ah, there's nothing like being back here," she announced cheerfully. "If I'd stayed with that idiot any longer, I would have lost my mind. I'll be here for a while. Oh, and make my meals too, would you?" From the very beginning, I knew she didn't like me. At our first family gathering, her disapproval had been obvious enough to anger my husband. During our wedding, she had sat there sulking, and later even told me bluntly, "My brother is handsome. He could have married someone way prettier." She openly mocked my background, calling it embarrassing that I had no parents. Thankfully, she had married and moved out before we did, so I thought I wouldn't have to deal with her much. That's why living with my in-laws had seemed manageable. Had she still been living there, I never would have agreed to move in. I assumed her return was only temporary, a few days, maybe a week, until things cooled off between her and her husband. Even when she made sharp comments, I believed my mother-in-law, who had always treated me kindly, would stand up for me. I couldn't have been more wrong. One evening, when I returned home from work, I noticed something was off. My mother-in-law, usually warm and chatty, barely acknowledged me. "Is something bothering you?" I asked carefully. She avoided my eyes and said coldly, "I heard you've been talking behind my back." "What? I would never do that. You've always been so kind to me. Why would I say anything bad about you? You act like the perfect daughter-in-law, but clearly you're not," she said, turning away. Standing in the hallway, my sister-in-law smirked smugly. "Looks like the orphan girl's true colors are showing. Thought you could fool everyone forever, huh?" she sneered. "You should know, gossip always gets around. Even the neighbors said you've been bad-mouthing Mom nonstop." "I haven't said anything," I insisted, my voice shaking. "Oh, don't get defensive. It's ugly, and honestly, who would believe someone like you anyway?" she said with a mocking laugh. Then she stormed into my mother-in-law's room, pretending to cry. "Mom, she's being so mean to me. She's calling me a liar." From that day on, things only got worse. My sister-in-law claimed I forced her to sleep in the hallway and said she had to take the last bath because she was just a guest. She twisted every small thing into a major offense, painting me as cruel and selfish. No matter how much I explained, my mother-in-law's trust in me was gone. She seemed to believe every word her daughter said. And my sister-in-law showed no signs of leaving. In fact, she acted more and more like she intended to stay indefinitely. Weighed down by all of it, I returned home each evening with a heavy heart. "I'm back," I said one night. No warm reply, only the hum of the television and the clatter of chopsticks. "I'll start making dinner," I said, stepping into the living room. There they were, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law, eating sushi, chatting and laughing like a real family. I stood there, groceries in hand, invisible. "Oh, look who's here," my sister-in-law said with a smirk. "You were hoping for sushi too, weren't you? Well, too bad." My mother-in-law didn't even glance at me. She kept her eyes glued to the TV. "If you wanted sushi, you should have said something," I managed to say, my voice small. "Ha, no one said they wanted to eat with you," my sister-in-law shot back. Then, as if twisting the knife deeper, she turned to her parents. "Hey Mom, Dad, I got some pudding while I was out. Let's all have some together." Again, I was excluded. Again, they laughed and shared dessert without even offering me a glance. I was too drained to argue. I quietly retreated to my room, stomach empty and heart aching. The next day, my sister-in-law asked me to drive her to the station so she could meet friends. It was a weekday. I had work. "I'm sorry, I can't. I have a meeting," I said. "Just take the day off," she whined. "Your cute little sis-in-law needs a ride. Can't you be a little nicer?" "You were out with friends just last night," I said carefully. "You've been going out almost every day. I really can't miss work." My refusal earned a round of whispering between her and my mother-in-law. I left for work feeling like a villain. That night, the incident that finally broke me happened. It had been raining heavily. I stayed late at the office to catch up on work, then picked up groceries and drove home, drenched from the storm. Bracing myself for whatever coldness awaited me, I walked through the door. There they were again, eating takeout happily without me, pretending not to see me. I was numb to it by now. But as I walked down the hallway, I caught sight of something through the window, something strange sitting in the middle of the courtyard. Peering closer, my heart froze. I stood frozen, staring at the sight in front of me, my belongings, scattered and drenched in the rain. There was my designer bag, the one I'd proudly bought with my first paycheck, the shoes I'd given my husband for his birthday, and my work computer, all ruined. My sister-in-law's voice broke through my shock. You know, having other people's things in the house just grosses me out, so I threw them out. Flaunting a designer bag like that, how arrogant of you, she sneered. Neither my mother-in-law nor father-in-law spoke a word, their silence deafening. Why didn't you stop her? I demanded, looking at my mother-in-law. Have I done something to you? Do you really believe her lies about me? Isn't it upsetting to see how she's treating me? How can you let her bully me and destroy my things like this? My mother-in-law didn't even look at me, her gaze drifting to the ground. Why won't you say anything? I pressed, desperation creeping into my voice. Her response was cold, almost indifferent. I can't talk to strangers. I can't be friendly with someone who's not family. My sister-in-law grinned, as though she were enjoying the sight of my broken spirit. Where's my father-in-law? I wondered aloud, looking around. I had been supporting him financially during his time off. I had been the one helping with expenses in this house, all out of gratitude for the family who had taken me in. Surely, he would stand up for me now, wouldn't he? Hoping for some support, I turned to him, but he walked past me without a word and retreated to his room. That was it. I see. I've had enough, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Oh, are you upset? My sister-in-law mocked. I'm sorry, honestly, I never liked you from the start. You're from an orphanage, and you think you can just waltz in here and play the perfect daughter-in-law. Just don't regret leaving. Good riddance, I shot back, my voice steady with finality. I packed my things swiftly, ready to leave without a second glance. My father-in-law looked worried, most likely because he knew I was the one holding everything together financially, but even he didn't attempt to stop me or speak up for me. His indifference only fueled my resolve. I knew my husband's work assignment was far away, but I didn't care. I couldn't stay one more minute in that house. I didn't even want to speak to him about this. I didn't think he was aware of what had been happening at his parents' house. If he had known, surely he would have reached out. But his silence made me wonder. Maybe she was feeding him lies, manipulating him against me. As I drove to him, my heart felt heavy, weighed down with doubt and suspicion. If my own family could turn against me so easily, would my husband do the same? Could I trust him? When I arrived at his apartment, I was greeted by his warm smile. What, you're here? You should have told me you were coming. I would have come back sooner. What a pleasant surprise. Just seeing your face, I said, forcing a half smile, feeling the conflict inside me. His beaming expression melted some of my anxiety, but I couldn't hide the pain anymore. After all the turmoil, all the rejection, I was exhausted. I barely held back the tears. What's wrong? Did I do something? Seriously, what's going on? He asked, concern flooding his voice. It was then that I realized, he had no idea about the torment I'd been enduring. He hadn't known the details of how his family had treated me. The weight lifted just a little, but there was still so much to explain. I started to tell him everything. How I'd been secretly sending money to his father to cover his medical leave, how my sister-in-law had returned, lied about me to his mother, and manipulated everyone to make me the villain. I told him how they treated me like a maid, how they ignored me, and worst of all, how they destroyed my things and laughed about it. As the words poured out, so did my tears. I told him I couldn't go back to that house. If he couldn't support me, I would leave him. Divorce seemed like the only way forward at that point, I thought. He listened quietly, and when I finished, his response was clear and resolute. I'm so sorry, he said softly. I was too focused on work. I didn't know. I should have checked in with you more often. I regret how my family has treated you. You never should have had to go through that. I'm here now, and you don't have to go back to that house. You don't have to see them again. I will cut ties with them. I won't help them financially anymore either. Relief washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension melt away. That night, we slept peacefully side by side, a quiet sense of comfort returning between us. I never went back to my in-laws' house. The idea of living with them again, of facing that kind of hostility, was unthinkable. Although commuting to my husband's out-of-state apartment wasn't the most practical solution, I made it work. My company had agreed to let me work remotely, which gave me the flexibility I needed. I still had to visit the office occasionally, but that was manageable. For the first time since our marriage, we were able to live like newlyweds, in peace and harmony. And then, life surprised us in the best way possible. I found out I was pregnant. The news was a joy beyond words, a new chapter we hadn't expected but eagerly embraced. We couldn't wait to meet our baby, and as I adjusted to my new life, I realized how much I had grown. From the pain, betrayal, and confusion, I had come to understand that my worth wasn't defined by others' judgments. And now, surrounded by the love of my husband and the anticipation of a child, I finally felt whole. As for my in-laws, their world was falling apart. After I left, they struggled. My father-in-law's health declined, and the pressure from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law only worsened. He eventually quit his job. My sister-in-law's marriage also fell apart when her husband found out about her affair, and her attempts to return to his family were rejected. The gossip about her personal life spread through town, further adding to her misery. As they scraped by, working part-time jobs and living in a cheap apartment, I was at peace, living a life filled with love and hope. My in-laws had tried to break me, but instead, they pushed me toward a future I never imagined, one filled with new beginnings. And as we prepared for the arrival of our child, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the strength I had found through it all, strength I didn't even know I had. We were finally free.